In this presentation, we continue the series of studies on the promise of the kingdom in the book of Daniel. Chapter 1 started with the attack upon Jerusalem and the debasement of its people and the captivity of children of nobility, but ended with the exaltation of the faithful children. The 4 Hebrew boys were faithful to God in matters of diet, so God blessed their education. They had excellent performance, being found superior in all manner of wisdom and understanding than all in Babylon, even presumably their teachers. This background brings us to Daniel chapter 2, when King Nebuchadnezzar received a vision from God. From verse 1, and in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants a dream, and we will show the interpretation. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If you will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut in pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. Nebuchadnezzar demanded to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans. I have forgotten my dream. It really was important. Remind me what it was and tell me what it means. That makes no sense. But the wise men had positioned themselves as the ultimate authority on everything. They pretended to understand dreams and visions by listening to the description and giving general interpretations, like modern psychics. But God prompted Nebuchadnezzar to recognize the dream he received was a divine portent. And then he took away the dream so as to create a situation where the pretended divine communication of the astrologers and Chaldeans and magicians and sorcerers would be exposed, and the nobility of his servants would be manifested. From verse 7, they answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from me. But if ye will not make known unto me the dream, there's but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me till the time be changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. The Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man on earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, Lord, nor ruler that asks such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. The king demanded the magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans recount the dream so that he could trust that they could interpret it. The Chaldeans were forced to acknowledge that they never had the ability to communicate with the gods who gave dreams. Now in Daniel 1:17, Daniel had understanding in visions and dreams. It is not clear how this was demonstrated in his first year, but he did not put himself forth as a diviner. For whatever reason, Daniel and his companions were not called out initially in Daniel chapter 2. But when the decree went out that all the wise men should be slain, they were included. From verse 13, and the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him the time, that he would show the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. The king had been upset that the Chaldeans apparently sought to delay, but could not promise to be able to interpret the dream. They apparently hoped that the king may have changed his mind, but Daniel prayed for time and promised that he would give the interpretation without expecting the king to recount the dream. Then Daniel and his companions prayed to the God of heaven. From verse 19, then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and has made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. So the dream was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, and he blessed the God of heaven and earth. Then he requested that the wise men not be destroyed, and asked to be taken to the king so that he might show the interpretation of the dream. Verse 25, then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah, that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen, and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets, and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter? And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Arioch brought in Daniel before the king, and the king asked Daniel whether he could make known the dream and the interpretation. Daniel did not point the king to himself. He disclaimed any special power. Just like the astrologers, magicians, soothsayers, and wise men, he could not personally reveal anything. But there is a God in heaven, the one true God. Look, the true God desires to tell you the future, O king. Therefore, Daniel desired the king to become acquainted with God. From verse 31, thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest still that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Such a short dream, we will tell. Daniel's companions may have accompanied him. The stone was cut out without hands. Cut from where? A mountain, verse 45. From verse 37. Thou, O king, art the king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron hath breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. Babylon was the first empire, and Nebuchadnezzar was the first and greatest king thereof. But Babylon would fall to an inferior, not better kingdom. The subsequent kingdom was that of Medo-Persia. Next was the kingdom of Greece. Next, the kingdom of Rome, inferior but stronger still. How do we know this sequence of kings? Well, in the end of the kingdom of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's descendant held a banquet while his city was besieged by the Medes and Persians. He thought his city was impregnable, so he celebrated. But fingers of a hand appeared and wrote on the wall. Daniel chapter 5 from verse 1. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to the 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. Then the king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Daniel was brought in to interpret a dream, and he rebuked the king for not learning from the history of his predecessor Nebuchadnezzar, but instead mocked God by bringing in the temple vessels to drink them. From verse 25. And this is the writing that was written, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God has numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with a scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. But look, the kingdom of Babylon would turn over to the Medes and the Persians. The dream given to King Nebuchadnezzar gave a broad overview. Further details of the future are revealed in Daniel chapter 7 and Daniel chapter 8. In Daniel chapter 8, verses 20 to 21, the next two nations after Babylon are mentioned by name. The lamb which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So, the student of history can verify the sequence of four great world empires. Babylon was the first, and Nebuchadnezzar was the greatest king thereof. The subsequent kingdom was that of Medo-Persia. Next was the kingdom of Greece. Next, the kingdom of Rome. From verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known unto the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. So, instead of a succession of world empires, the fourth kingdom would be divided, and there would never again be another world empire until the God of heaven sets up an eternal kingdom on earth. Daniel chapter 7, 8, and 10 to 12 go into further details about what happens during the time of the divided kingdoms, in particular the persecution of God's people by the blasphemous Antichrist. So, What we have going on in the world is powerful people trying to establish themselves as supreme in defiance of the God of heaven. But just as Belshazzar, they shall be taken and destroyed in the height of their power. They don't see that they are about to fall. So those verses from verse 41 to 45 contain special interpretation. Verse 41. The feet and toes of iron and clay indicated that the fourth kingdom would be divided and yet have the strength of iron, the same destructive power that characterized it before its division. 42. The toes part of iron and clay represented that the kingdom would be partly strong and partly broken. 43. The iron mixed with miry clay represented that they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Who is they? What kind of mingling is here represented? Verse 44. They are the kings of the divided fourth kingdom. Those kings will attempt a union, but they shall not succeed. In the days of the kings attempting such a union, God shall set up a kingdom that shall last forever, first breaking and consuming all the former kingdoms. 45. The cutting out without hands of the stone which destroyed all former kingdoms is a divine act. The final destruction envisioned here is not subject to man's help or hindrance. Therefore, the dream is certain and the interpretation sure. Continuing from verse 46. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, Of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal the secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Chapters 2 started with the confusion of the king who forgot the dream given him by God. Then the faithful Hebrews were almost executed because the astrologers and magicians and sorcerers and Chaldeans could not recount the dream to the king or give its interpretation. After Daniel and his friends prayed, the Lord God revealed the dream and the interpretation to Daniel and his friends, which Daniel recounted to the king. As the king recognized the superiority of Daniel's God, the king referenced Daniel's God through Daniel and exalted Daniel and his friends within the kingdom. In this chapter, the vision of the great statue ended with the establishment of God's eternal kingdom. We are ending this presentation again with a promise that we will realize is central to the prophecies of Daniel. Luke chapter 12, verse 32. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. I pray that we all choose to be faithful to the Lord God Almighty.